You think you're smart, don't you? People like you always have an excuse.
Check the cameras, officer. You are making a constitutional error you will regret. Check them.
This is the sound of a career ending in seconds. It's 1:15 p.m. at the downtown Deli, right in the heart of the financial district. Officer Greg Davies looks at a black woman in a baggy hoodie and worn-out flip-flops, and he sees a criminal. He sees a target. Driven by racial profiling and a false accusation from a wealthy customer, he decides to humiliate her publicly. But he missed one crucial detail. The woman he just shoved onto the dirty floor isn't a thief. She is Judge Brianna Vance, one of the most powerful federal judges in the state, and this $2 million mistake is about to go viral. Before we continue, let me know in the comments where you're watching from right now. Whether you're in the US, the UK, Canada, Africa, or anywhere else in the world, I want to hear from you. And if you're new here, please take a second to hit that subscribe button. It helps this channel grow and allows us to keep bringing you stories like this. Now, let's get back to what happened. To understand the sheer magnitude of the mistake about to take place, we have to rewind the clock 2 hours before the incident. Meet Brianna Vance. In the hallowed, marble-lined halls of the federal courthouse, she is nothing short of a titan. At just 35 years old, she is the youngest presiding federal judge in the district's history, a legal prodigy who graduated top of her class from Harvard Law. When Judge Vance enters a courtroom, the atmosphere shifts instantly. Defense attorneys tremble, and seasoned prosecutors frantically double-check their paperwork. She is known in the legal community as the Iron Gavel, fair, brilliant, and utterly uncompromising when it comes to the Constitution. Just this morning, she had sentenced a corrupt corporate CEO to 20 years in prison, proving that in her courtroom, wealth and influence cannot buy freedom. She is a pillar of the community, a woman who has dedicated her life to upholding justice and protecting the vulnerable. But at 1 p.m., the heavy oak doors closed, and the intimidating black robe came off. Brianna wasn't just a legal powerhouse. She was also human. It was her lunch break, and she had a rare gap in her grueling schedule to grab a quick bite. She swapped her judicial uniform for a faded heather gray hoodie that was 2 sizes too big and basic black yoga leggings. She traded her polished court heels for a pair of pink flip-flops that had seen better days, her favorite comfort shoes for slipping out of the office unnoticed. With her hair thrown up in a messy bun and her face completely free of makeup, Judge Vance looked nothing like the terrifying authority figure she truly was. To the untrained, judgmental eye, she didn't look like a federal judge. She looked like an exhausted mother, or perhaps a struggling student trying to make ends meet. She looked ordinary. And sadly, in the eyes of some, she looked like she didn't belong in the wealthy financial district. As she walked 2 blocks to downtown Deli, a chaotic spot popular with the city's elite, nobody looked twice. The bankers in their $3,000 suits ignored her. The socialites with their designer handbags brushed past her without a second thought. They saw the cheap flip-flops, not the formidable mind that could sign a warrant to search their homes with a single flick of a pen. She was enjoying the anonymity, unaware that her simple desire for a turkey sandwich was about to turn into a constitutional crisis. She was walking into a trap, armed with nothing but her invisible authority. And God help the person who mistook her silence for weakness. The atmosphere in the crowded deli shifted from bustling to suffocating in a heartbeat. It started with a shriek. Susan, a woman draped in a beige trench coat and clutching a designer handbag, began screaming that her wallet was gone. She didn't look for it under her table. She didn't check her oversized coat pockets. Instead, her eyes darted around the room and landed on the only convenient scapegoat available. She pointed a manicured finger directly at Brianna. It was her, that woman in the hoodie. She bumped into me. It was a blatant lie. Brianna had been standing 5 feet away, patiently waiting for her turkey sub, but the accusation hung in the air like toxic smoke. Enter Officer Greg Davies. He didn't walk in to investigate, he walked in to enforce. He saw Susan white, wealthy, hysterical, and immediately categorized her as the victim. Then he turned his gaze to Brianna. He scanned her from top to bottom. He saw the messy hair, the oversized gray hoodie, and the cheap pink flip-flops. He didn't see a citizen, he saw a suspect. He saw a stereotype. In his mind, the math was simple. Black plus poor clothing equals guilty. He didn't ask for a witness statement. He didn't ask to check the security cameras that were blinking right above their heads. He simply marched toward Brianna with his hand resting ominously on his belt. "Ma'am, step away from the counter," Davies barked, his voice dripping with condescension. This was the pivotal moment. Brianna's hand instinctively twitched toward her waist, where her federal ID was tucked away. She could have ended this instantly. She could have flashed the gold badge that outranked everyone in the building and watched his face crumble, but she stopped. A cold, steely resolve washed over her. She realized this wasn't just about a sandwich anymore, it was a test of the system she served. If he would treat a federal judge this way, how is he treating people who couldn't fight back? She decided to leave the badge hidden. She decided to let him dig his own grave. "Officer," Brianna said, her voice terrifyingly calm, "I have not touched that woman. I suggest you check the cameras before you proceed." Davies laughed, a short, humorless sound. He stepped into her personal space, looming over her. "I don't need cameras to see what's happening here," he sneered. He had taken the bait. He was walking blindly into a trap of his own prejudice. Why do you think he refused to check the cameras? Was it laziness? Or did he just want a reason to use his power? "Enough with the attitude," Davies roared, his patience evaporating. He didn't care about probable cause. He cared about dominance. When Brianna calmly stated, "Officer, under the Fourth Amendment, you have no right to search my person or my property without a warrant or reasonable suspicion," it was like throwing gasoline on a fire. To him, her knowledge of the law wasn't a sign of education. It was an act of defiance. He stepped forward, invading her personal space, his breath hot with aggression. "I am the law here, not you. Drop the bag, or I will drop you." The entire deli went silent. Forks froze midair. Susan, the accuser, watched with a smug, twisted satisfaction. Davies didn't wait for compliance. He lunged. He grabbed Brianna's arm, twisting it behind her back with unnecessary, brutal force. The pain was sharp, but Brianna didn't scream. She didn't fight back. She went limp, allowing him to slam her chest against the cold, sticky counter. "Stop resisting!" He bellowed, the classic line used to justify excessive force when there is no resistance at all. He kicked her legs apart, forcing her to kneel on the dirty checkered floor, right next to a discarded napkin and a stepped-on ketchup packet. "You people always think you can talk your way out of it," Davies spat, tightening the handcuffs until they bit into her skin. He was treating a federal judge like a street thug. He rifled through her pockets, tossing her phone onto the floor, cracking the screen. He was completely oblivious to the red light blinking on the ceiling CCTV camera directly above him. He was also blind to the dozen customers who had quietly pulled out their smartphones, recording every second of this abuse of power. He thought he was teaching her a lesson about her place in society. In reality, he was documenting his own destruction, frame by frame, in high definition. He had just violated the civil rights of the wrong woman, and the clock was ticking down to his ruin. Does seeing this kind of abuse of power make your blood boil? The deli fell into a deafening silence. From her humiliating position on the dirty floor, Brianna didn't plead or cry. Instead, her voice cut through the noise with the cold, absolute authority of a woman who decides the fate of men for a living. "Officer," she said, her tone sharp enough to draw blood, "before you continue destroying your life, I want you to look under the table to your right, about 6 inches from that lady's high heel." Officer Davies frowned, confused by her sudden change in demeanor. He glanced down. Susan, the accuser, followed his gaze. There, wedged perfectly between the table leg and the wall, sat the beige designer wallet. It hadn't been stolen. It had slipped off the table while Susan was busy judging Brianna's outfit. Susan gasped, snatching it up, her face turning a bright, embarrassed shade of red. "Oh," she mumbled, shrinking back. I found it." The theft accusation had evaporated instantly, but the handcuffs were still on. The assault had already happened. Davies stood there, blinking, suddenly realizing he had no probable cause left. But Brianna wasn't done with him. "Now," she commanded, shifting her gaze to the fanny pack Davies had ripped from her waist and thrown onto the counter. "Open the front zipper of that bag. Take out the leather wallet inside." Davies hesitated. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. The crowd was watching, phones raised high. He reached for the bag, his movements stiff and clumsy. He unzipped it. He pulled out a sleek, black leather bifold. "Open it," Brianna ordered. He flipped it open. The gold badge gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, but it was the text engraved below the eagle that made his heart stop beating. United States Federal Judge. Next to it was her ID card, the Honorable Brianna Vance. The color didn't just fade from Officer Davies' face. It vanished. He looked like he had seen a ghost. His eyes bulged, darting from the badge to the woman in yoga pants he had just slammed onto the floor. His hands began to tremble uncontrollably, the badge rattling in his grip. The realization hit him like a freight train. He hadn't just arrested a suspect. He had assaulted a high-ranking federal official. He had violated the constitutional rights of a woman whose job was to interpret the Constitution. "Uncuff me," Brianna said. It wasn't a request. It was a sentence. Davies fumbled for his keys, his fingers shaking so badly he dropped them twice. The terrifying arrogance he had displayed just moments ago was replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. As the metal cuffs clicked open, Brianna stood up, rubbing her wrists. She didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked like a predator who had just trapped her prey. She leaned in close to the trembling officer, her voice low and dangerous. "You have the right to remain silent, Officer Davies. I suggest you start using it right now. Do you feel satisfied seeing this bully finally get what he deserves?" It took exactly 12 minutes for the atmosphere in the deli to shift from a local disturbance to a federal crime scene. The arrival wasn't subtle. 2 black SUVs screeched to a halt outside, followed by the chief of police himself. When you assault a federal judge, you don't just get a slap on the wrist. You bring down the entire weight of the United States government upon your department. Judge Vance didn't just call a lawyer. She triggered a full-scale internal affairs investigation coordinated with the FBI's Civil Rights Division. The deli was evacuated and sealed off. Officer Davies sat in the back of a squad car, stripped of his weapon and badge, watching through the window as men in suits seized the hard drive from the store's security system. Back at the precinct, the footage was played on a large monitor in a room filled with silence and dread. The evidence was damning. The high-definition video from the deli's ceiling camera offered a bird's-eye view of the prejudice in action. Frame by frame, investigators dissected Davies' behavior. They watched him ignore the hysterical accuser's lack of evidence. They watched his eyes travel down to Brianna's flip-flops, a visual confirmation of his bias. They saw the exact microsecond he decided she was guilty, based solely on her socioeconomic appearance. The audio from his own body cam sealed his fate, capturing the sneering tone and the refusal to check the facts, a clear violation of standard operating procedure. But the investigation didn't stop at the lunch counter. This is where the story turns from a single mistake into a horror show. The FBI demanded Officer Davies' personnel file the real one, not the sanitized version shown to the public. What they found was a graveyard of buried complaints. Brianna wasn't the first victim. She was just the first one with the power to fight back. The files revealed a disturbing pattern spanning a decade. 3 years ago, Davies had detained a young black medical student for loitering in his own apartment complex because he was wearing a hoodie. The student had missed an exam and lost his scholarship, his life derailed by a baseless arrest. 6 months prior to that, Davies had aggressively searched a 60-year-old grandmother's grocery bags, claiming she looked suspicious, humiliating her in front of her neighbors. In every single case, the victims were people of color, and in every single case, the department had dismissed the complaints as unfounded. Davies was not a protector of the peace. He was a predator, with a badge, hiding behind the blue wall of silence. He had spent years bullying those he deemed powerless. Confident that no one would believe them over a police officer, he thought he was untouchable. But as the investigators lined up the photos of the past victims next to the photo of Judge Vance, the realization was clear. He had finally hunted the wrong prey. The footage of him assaulting Judge Vance became the key that unlocked a decade of injustice. This was no longer just about a lunch break gone wrong. It was about exposing a systemic rot that had been festering in the darkness for years. And now, thanks to the undeniable evidence recorded from multiple angles, the darkness was about to be flooded with a blinding, unforgiving light. The system that had protected him for so long was now sharpening its knives to dismantle him. 6 months later, the courtroom was packed to capacity, but you could hear a pin drop. This wasn't just a trial, it was a public reckoning. Greg Davies stood before the bench, but the arrogant bully from the sandwich shop was gone. In his place stood a broken man, slumped in a cheap suit, his face pale and gaunt. He had lost his job, his pension, and his reputation. Now he was about to lose his freedom. The defense tried to argue that it was a heat-of-the-moment mistake, a lapse in judgment. But the prosecution, armed with the damning body cam footage and the testimony of past victims, painted a different picture. They showed a man who used his badge as a weapon to terrorize the community he was sworn to protect. The presiding judge looked down at Davies with eyes of stone. The verdict was swift and merciless. Greg Davies, you have been found guilty of deprivation of rights under color of law, aggravated assault, and false imprisonment. The gavel came down with a thunderous crack that echoed like a gunshot. I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. A gasp ripped through the gallery. 15 years. Davies' knees buckled. He collapsed into his chair, sobbing into his hands, but there was no sympathy in that room. The sound of the bailiff's handcuffs clicking onto his wrists was the ultimate poetic justice, the exact same sound Davies had used to traumatize so many others. But the punishment didn't end with prison. The civil lawsuit concluded with a historic settlement. The city, desperate to avoid further embarrassment, agreed to pay Judge Brianna Vance $2 million in damages for the violation of her civil rights. It was a staggering sum, an admission of catastrophic failure. Yet, in the final twist of this saga, Brianna didn't keep a single cent. Standing on the courthouse steps, surrounded by flashing cameras and cheering crowds, she announced that the entire $2 million would be used to establish the Vance Legal Defense Fund. This new organization would provide top-tier legal representation for victims of racial profiling who couldn't afford to fight back. As Davies was led away to a waiting transport van, shuffling in leg irons and keeping his head down to hide from the news choppers, he looked small. He looked powerless. He had tried to bury a woman because of her appearance, but instead, he had built her a pedestal. He was going to a concrete cell, while the woman he tried to humiliate was using his money to ensure that men like him would never get away with this again. Justice wasn't just served. It was delivered with interest. The story of Judge Brianna Vance is more than just a viral moment. It is a harsh, necessary mirror held up to society. It forces us to ask a terrifying question. What would have happened if she wasn't a federal judge? What if she really was just a tired mother buying a sandwich? Would anyone have listened? Would the handcuffs ever have come off? Officer Davies didn't just fail to do his job, he failed as a human being. He fell victim to the most dangerous disease in law enforcement, the arrogance of assumption. He looked at a woman in a hoodie and saw a target, completely blind to the fact that he was assaulting the very embodiment of the law he swore to uphold. Let this be a warning to anyone who thinks a badge, a uniform, or a position of authority gives them the right to punch down. We are living in an era where every smartphone is a witness, and every silence can be broken. The days of operating in the shadows are over. Judge Vance proved that true power doesn't need to scream, it doesn't need to intimidate, and it certainly doesn't need to brag. True power is quiet, it is confident. And as Greg Davies learned the hard way, it is always watching. The $2 million Brianna won won't just buy a new wardrobe. It is funding a revolution. It is ensuring that the next time a bully tries to crush someone based on the color of their skin or the cost of their shoes, there will be a lawyer ready to fight back. If this story satisfied your craving for justice, if you believe that every bully deserves to meet their match, then do me a favor. Smash that like button right now. It tells the algorithm that the world needs more truth. And if you are not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Join our community today so you never miss a moment of instant karma. But don't go anywhere just yet. If you thought the look on Officer Davies' face was priceless, you need to see what happened when a corrupt CEO tried to fire his own undercover boss. It is the most satisfying meltdown we have ever covered. Click the video on your screen right now, and I will see you there. Stay sharp, stay safe, and remember, never judge a book by its cover.